Last of season 3.
Here's the last one.
It is.
We shall miss them. We shall miss them. That's a quote from Doctor Who, that is.
Yeah. Hartnell soliloquy. Soliloquy, that's the one. It is a difficult word to say, though, isn't it?
I'm still not convinced that Jason's ever watched Doctor Who. I swear. There's just points I'm like...
I have watched it. I just watch it in a different way, I think, to everybody else.
Asleep.
In your sleep.
Yay! Hello and welcome to series 3. I've got my fingers, but the words are wrong. Welcome to season 3, part 5 of 5. 5 of 5. 3, 5 of 5. It's the thrilling conclusion. Well done if you made it this far. You've passed many trials and tribulations. Like us, subscribe to us, put exciting and insightful things underneath. Read them, interact with them. That's a threat, a promise. I'm Paul or P-Bal, and I am joined by...
You've got the pointy fingers already.
I know. It's my mystical paws.
Hello,
Like that.
James.
Hello, it's Jason. P-Bal's the Ted Rogers of our group, isn't he? He's got all the fingers going on there.
I'm the Ted Rogers and you're the Dusty Ben.
Oh, we're getting off to a
Right,
great start already. Oh, no, this is going to be a cracker, isn't it?
It's the way I tell them. That's Frank Castle. Anyway, could do the what's it. I'd be great with those. You know, when you have to see whether the thing's under the thing, under the cup, and the cup, and the cup. Anyway, I'll give you a little rundown on the scores. It's probably because it's such a long season. It takes about an hour to run back through the scores. Tragedies, we've got them. Rock bottom is the Gunfighters on 12.5. One step above it is Galaxy 4 on 13.5. 19 points for the Celestial Toymaker. 20.5 for both Mission to the Unknown and the Massacre. Both on 21 are Myth Makers and the Ark, and our current season leader, thanks to a 10 from James, is the Dalek's Master Plan on 24. That could all change. Place your bets. It's like Late Night Casino on ITV. Place your bets. It could all change. I prefer Ideal World. Buying is amazing.
James will turn up and stick his money on everything.
Early shady. Gosh.
She's off already.
Well,
Wow.
I think that 10 is... We keep talking about this 10.
I stand by my 10. I gave my reasons for it.
James liked the script. You can understand that, can't you, Jason?
I can. I have an affinity with that. I can follow that. I can follow that rationale there.
His reasons for it is 12 parts and it starred William Hartnell and the Daleks. You know the sort of thing.
And the monk.
All over it. Actually, though, but he in the last video, he scored 4 episodes for 4 points. He's pinching all of my USPs.
Look at what is going on with him. It's all...
The Sonatagen's gone cheap in Tesco. He's overdosed.
It's been a long day.
Well, it's about to get longer. We've got 2 more stories to go, and the first of those stories is The Savages. I won't do its working title because it's a little bit awkward. You're both looking at me blank there. It was originally called The White Savages, which implies that savages are probably not white. Not a good place to be. On a happier note, is it 3 copies of The Savages in hardback?
I don't know what to say.
Are you just going to reveal a whole shelf of the War Machine?
I'm literally going to reveal Votan behind here printing them. Just the 4. Just the 3 of these. Just the 3 of these. This one. Oh, look, it's signed by Jackie and Peter. Put your bids below. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Who has an introduction of this? And does it start landing on a distant planet? The Doctor confidently announces to his companions that the TARDIS has brought them all to an age of great advancement, peace, and prosperity.
I mean, we don't even need to give it an introduction now, do we?
Jason's not watched, has he?
I have watched The Savages.
I mean recently. I don't mean in 1966.
You what, sorry?
I mean recently, not 1966.
I would have been lucky if I'd seen it in 1966. I'd have actually seen the real thing rather than a recon.
He was at school in 1966.
He was at work. Let's not beat a bush. He was at work. He was thinking about his retirement party.
That's just rude.
Oh.
Rude.
So, what is the intro to Doctor and the Savages, and which ones are you gonna do it?
I don't mind. I wrote down the really savage thing about this is the way that Peter Purves gets treated. This is how to leave the TARDIS without being married off to the first person you meet. So we have the end of the last story. You saw the sort of image of the Savage standing in front of the TARDIS, and they've arrived on this planet where there are two tribes, and this is a now more familiar story to us. One of the tribes is superior over the other one, and it turns out that the elders, who are more advanced and have built this civilization, are draining the life force of the savages and making them weak and sort of servants to them. And in goes the TARDIS crew, and they seem to be expecting the Doctor at the beginning. They've been waiting for him to arrive, and then it's sort of the morality tale of what they're actually doing, how they're using the savages to keep their civilization going, and how the TARDIS crew get involved in that. And yes, it's my little synopsis.
It's basically Dracula, isn't it? It's sort of a weave on it, isn't it? There's a sort of, draining life force, and but it's fine. Actually, it's interesting. It does feel like it goes at a good pace, this one. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the best thing that's ever been knocked out, but I do like it, actually. It's it's one of those, I suppose, it's slightly forgotten in the mix of things, isn't it? Because there's so little. I mean, there is none of it. There's those little 8mm trims, aren't there, from the person who filmed the screen in Australia. So every now and then on the reconstruction, somebody slightly moves, and it's like, it's exciting.
And I'd forgotten there were quite so many little clips of it there, actually, when I watched the recon.
I mean, the big magic of that is that the person who did record those things had obviously seen them before, because they knew roughly where the things that they wanted to record were coming, didn't they? I mean, unless they recorded it and then, because I don't know. But it's thanks to them we get those bits, so you get to see Stephen suddenly saying goodbye to everybody and going and all that sort of thing, Like it's a sort of, I don't know, it's quite a formulaic story, but I think it's a strong formulaic story. I think it works well.
Yes, I would agree. And it is quite a quick ending, really, isn't it? Because you don't see it. You see it in some of the companion exits building up, but you really don't get this ending for Stephen until just right, especially right at the very end of the episode 4. And it's really quick, and it's really like the Doctor's like, yes, I think that's a great idea. Thanks very much. We'll leave you to it, and off we go. And obviously Dodo looks upset on the telesnaps that we can see, or the little clips that we can see. But it does feel like quite a hasty exit, really, doesn't it?
It does, and this is what I was saying on the previous recording that we did, that this is where the cracks, you can see they're like, right, we are redoing this shit, we are changing everything behind the scenes that already had some big changes, which we know Hartnell wasn't very sort of favourable of. This was another blow to him, because he got on well with Peter and didn't like the fact that his contract just came to an end. He was told, we're only going to have the companions now for 1 year at a time, so we're writing you out of this story. And so it feels very, that last moment where they're like, oh, now we've got the two tribes together, and they've got to learn to live with each other, and they want the Doctor to sort of adjudicate and take over as the elder, and he's just like, oh, I can't possibly do that. Let Stephen do it, you know. And it's kind of like, all right, you know, in some ways, you know, we've been talking about how Stephen has become a leading man. You know, he's taken on that mantle. He's become more of the key figure. So in some cases, there's kind of a nice payoff that he's seen as this trusted elder that can bring these two tribes together. But on the other hand, it just feels very convenient that we need to drop you for the next story. So here we go. I mean, if you look back at all the different companion exits, and I know sometimes we do question them about how sometimes they go off with the first man that they meet, or it's a really sort of rushed and somehow unfulfilled ending. That's kind of how this feels. It's kind of like the twist at the end is just like, right, we're leaving Stephen and we're going. And I think it's a shame, because Stephen has grown and grown and grown as a character, and you want there to be a slightly bigger payoff to him leaving at this point. And I know we're going to talk in our next story about another companion leaving, but it just feels like they've got the broom out and they're like, right, you know, we're sorting everything out, ready for things that are going to come up in the next season. Let's get rid of all the things we want to change now.
And it feels rushed, but it also feels wrong to a degree, because having gone back through these stories now the way that we have, as I said, I think in the last recording, I've reevaluated Peter's performance as Stephen, and actually he had a really strong run. It's a shame we don't have a lot of it to watch, but it feels like, having gone through all the recons and gone through all of the stories now, again in sort of order, it feels like he had a very strong run. And, you know, he was definitely pushed to the front to become more of the leading man because of Hartnell's sort of failing health, if you like. And, you know, there are so many stories and so many episodes, there are so many episodes, I should say, within stories that he carried he carried a lot of the action. And it's noticeable in things like Dalek Master Plan, for example. It's noticeable in The Massacre. So to me, it doesn't feel like a fitting end the way he's written. And I know obviously there's things going on behind the scenes, but it just doesn't feel fitting for, I think, a companion that had the run that Peter did as Stephen.
I don't know if I mind his exit, actually. Two Companions is always a slight difficult thing to how do you persuade everyone that they've decided that, you know, the fun and the adventures is what they don't want anymore. And essentially you've got to go with the human emotion. I suppose marrying someone is saying that they love them, and the love is stronger than their desire to be with them. If it's Joe and Professor Jones or something, you go, okay, that I can buy that, it happens, it's fine. Leela and Andred, you go, okay, get back on Tinder, love. Whereas I don't know, I don't quite know how else you could have left, because I mean, it'd have been terrible to have had him killed off, because I think that would have been a sort of pretty brutal and unhappy end for him. But he does become the leader on the planet. I mean, Peter always jokes that he'd like it to turn out that he becomes like a despot and he's the cruel tyrant and all that stuff. But I don't mind it. I don't mind that he's sort of, because he has then become, you know, he's gone on his journey and he's become, you know, the new leader of these people, because the Doctor knows that he can do what he would to do. So I suppose it's that validation in some ways of him saying, they want me, but I know that you are, you know, the same as me, as good as me, you can do this, and I've got the faith in you. That's quite nice. I mean, Hartnell underplays it, I think, quite well in that scene. And, you know, you get the emotion of Dodo, who's bereft, isn't she? She's crying her heart out. And I quite like it. I think it's heightened without it being over. It does seem quite quick, but I find that more believable than quite a lot of other sort of. I mean, you know, look at I don't know, people like Tegan's exit, which she goes, oh, you know, a lot of people died today. A lot of people died last week and the week before and the week. You know, what was it about Chloe Ashcroft you decided was the tipping point? I think it is a very difficult thing, and the show doesn't always get it right with how people leave. I actually don't mind Stephen's exit, or he's having to look at it.
And of course, this is the first story where we don't have individual episode titles. So we have Doctor Who Under the Savages, part 1 through to 4. And it's a shame because I actually missed the individual episode titles, because we've had some pretty zany ones through. We had some pretty odd ones through the Gunfighters. There were definitely some odd ones as we came through the Mythmakers, but yeah, it's a changing of the guard again, isn't it? All little tiny things changing in the program, and this is just another example of that.
I mean, I quite like like you say, it's quite formulaic of the actual story itself. I quite like the idea that when they drain the Doctor's energy, his higher sort of intelligence and, you know, his moral compass and things like that all go with it, so that they become, you know, if you think about more modern Who, it probably would have been all the regeneration energy pouring into someone else and they would have become part Time Lords. But they kind of take on that consciousness of the Doctor and the morality. So I quite like that idea, and I know we're way before anyone started talking about regeneration and you know, sort of energy around that, but it does fit in with what has come after that, this idea that, you know, in other episodes where the Doctor uses some of his regeneration energy to heal River or something like that, you know, that there is this life force energy that the Doctor does have, because they talk about it going off the chart, and, you know, they previously been draining these savages, and then suddenly the Doctor comes along and he's like this, you know, huge megawatt battery. Is just like, great, you know, think of what we could do with him. And then they think about the companions as well, thinking that they would be the same. So I like that aspect of it, you know, that the Doctor is like this brand new power source, but it's that power source that, you know, causes a revolution. Because in sort of Doctor Who style, they try to encourage the savages to rebel and, you know, take over from the elders, and they really struggle to get them to do that until, you know, this has happened and one of the elders has sort of turned against them and said, actually, this is wrong. So that sort of kickstarts the revolution, if you like. So I like that aspect of it, that it's something slightly different.
It's Jano's act of aggression, isn't it? That's then turned into, because he's like, I'll have your energy, and that's all right. It's that act of aggression that's then turned against him by him being imbued with the positivity and the moral, you know. So it's quite a nice payoff from that point, because you think, as a plot point, oh no, TV's Doctor Who's done for now. They're going to drain him. He's going to turn into Patrick Troughton early. It is nice because it's also slightly nicely played, because it's sort of very slowly revealed that's how he's been affected by it.
Yeah.
It's good to have Christopher Barry back. I mean, we can't see an awful lot of this. There's telesnaps and things like that, so we can see more of this. There's more of a hint of what this is about. The location stuff looks nice. It's nice to be out on location to get some sequences with the elders and stuff like that. Not the elders, the soldier guys. Anyway. It's nice to have some bits on location. I think that looks like it works well, and it feels a bigger universe than we had with the Gunfighters being very sort of studio and confined. This feels like it's out into an open world now, and I think that's good. I really like the incidental music as well. It's I'm gonna get his name wrong again. It's Raymond Jones, who did the Romans and this, but it was the thing that struck me actually watching. I say watching. I feel odd saying watching. It's a reconstruction, so I am watching it. But yeah, the music struck me as actually quite interesting, and it's a shame that he only did the two actually.
And I like Frederick Jaeger's take of Hartnell, because he sort of picks up the mannerisms of Bill Hartnell as part of the performance. It picks up the mannerisms of the Doctor, which is I find it's quite nicely delivered.
Hartnell coached him on it, so they actually had some sessions where he was like, "This is what I do as the Doctor." So he really helped him to do the impersonation, which is really nice.
I hope he didn't coach him like he coached Jack Pitt. Moving on. I like the Avon and Flower. That's quite a nice sort of subplot, isn't it? But I like the notion that you do go, oh, this is a lovely society, and look, they're all pretty, and it's all lovely, and they're also there's quite a they're living in fear even within that and uncertainty. That's quite a nice layer to that. I mean, again, Dodo is still gun ho on being quite feisty in this. I mean, she gives them what for in the transference room, doesn't she? I mean, she's a bit of an icon, isn't she, on the quiet? I mean, we've always loved Jackie, but Dodo as herself, I think, is actually a genuinely sort of what the kids will call a Dodo stan now. Well, I've been on the Twitter and the TikTok. I know what they're all saying, and I'm now a Dodo stan because I think she really does. And again, it's so there's that slight thing, isn't there, of knowing what's coming up and all that sort of stuff, which you wouldn't have known at the time when you were just watching it. But I know for a fact what's going to happen next story, and I'm kind of thinking, oh my days, she's been so feisty and vivacious and enjoyable, and she's about to get a great big horse turd dropped on her next week, and it's really cruel. You can sort of see why she sort of lost the love with the industry in some ways, because her great reward for, I mean, she became an agent of it, and the acting point is that she did such a great thing and a great run in this, to then be sort of rewarded with contracts of episode 2. Let's see you later. And I think she's really good in this, and I think she's feisty, and she's engaging as well. And even by this point, there's points where they're like, oh well, if there's something, if there's the wrong door to go through, or someone's going to look into it, Dodo's going to do it. And it's nice that it's already established that she's inquisitive and Dodo stan.
It's a shame, because we were talking in the about the previous story. There's such a good companion set. If you can imagine the Dodo and Stephen in some other Doctor Who stories where the companions weren't necessarily as good, they really work together. And there's a scene, I think it's at the beginning of this, where they have a little bit of a fallout. But she's later on, she's really genuinely upset that he's not going with them. There is a genuine connection between them, and that's why they work so well. They can be separated from the Doctor. They can have their own little adventure. They don't just get swept up in events. They like you say, she's really feisty. She's really inquisitive. She wants to go and fight and find out what's going on. And Stephen is the same. So you can have all of that, and they are like the Barbara and Ian, if you like. But by the time Barbara and Ian left, they were very much the strong two, and they had their own adventure, and they played a pivotal part in it. And you just get that sense here that that's where they've got to. And then Stephen's being left to become a ruler, which, fair enough, there are worse ways that you could leave as in Doctor Who, but it is a shame, especially given the next episode, that dynamic is swept away so quickly. Don't get me wrong, new dynamics come in, and we've talked about some of those relationships already. But at this point, it's like, if I was watching the very beginning of this, not knowing that this was Stephen's last story, I think I'd be genuinely upset at the end when you get to the point where he's like, well, I'm gonna stay, because they had become this established team. And especially with Hartnell's ill health and holidays, you would have got used to seeing more and more of them as the episodes had gone on, and then suddenly that's gone.
Yeah, because Stephen's character gets to interact with a number of essentially sidekick companions as he comes through the stories. And obviously starting off with Maureen, then getting back, Adrienne for a couple of weeks, and then possibly Sarah, Jean Marsh, Sarah Kingdom, if you do treat her as a companion in there. But this companion pairing of him and Jackie works so well because there just is genuinely a very strong chemistry on screen. And again, we can't see a lot of it, but it comes across even just in the audios, I think. I think it was a shame that the direction of travel was to take these two actors out of the series and replace them further on. Obviously, done for a reason, or reasons we will talk about when we get to the War Machines. But I rate them. I think they're a great companion pair, and the rewatch has certainly helped me to reevaluate, I think, the way I've thought about it in the past.
Yeah, I think, without getting on a soapbox, I would say to anyone who is watching this, even if you just do one season, I would really advocate saying just watch the whole sort of run in all. I know people obviously do that maybe with the collection sets, they do the season. If you can do as much of it in the actual order it's meant to be in as you can. I mean, I've never done the start from An Earthly Child and run straight the way through, which ironically we could have probably just done that. We'd probably been a more honest way of doing all this. But it really does give you a different perspective, because I think, especially I would say us older folk who watched it for longer, we're probably slightly guilty of having our favourites and the ones we don't like, and having never watched Canine and Company or something like that. Is that true? And someone say they'd never watched Canine and Company in 50 years of being a Doctor Who fan. Anyway, but I think we're quite guilty of saying, I really like Earthshock, I really like whatever, and then you only watch the dribs and the drams of the ones you want to watch, which is fine because we haven't got all the hours in the day to do it. But there is a real reward, as I think we found with a lot of these seasons, of going and seeing it as a show and as a context, and seeing that so and so has left or so and so has come in, and seeing how that's part of it.
Yeah, because we've essentially watched 42 weeks worth across the review of season 3, and I hand on heart never watched Doctor Who in a run from the very beginning all the way through, and I've always been sporadic in the way that I've viewed Doctor Who. I will watch a 4-part here or a 6-part there, depending upon where I've got the time, as you've just said. But there is something that's actually quite satisfying watching them through, because you see that development and you see the ebbs and the flows of the season as it goes, and I just think it helps give you a slightly different interpretation of some of the standalone stories when you evaluate them all in one go.
It does. It gives you the thing I found is that I do watch whole seasons in a run, so I'll watch a whole load in one go, but it tends to be from the Pertwee years onwards. I've watched most of these stories from the first 2 Doctors, but normally when the DVDs have come out, it's normally been watch it once, then put it back on the shelf. So it's never really been in chronological order of when it was put out. Going back and watching some of these seasons, you're right. I've discovered some stories which I probably watched once and then put back on the shelf, which now watching again, I've really enjoyed, and I've gone, this is something that I will quite happily watch again. I wouldn't necessarily sit down and watch the whole of season 3 again, but there are certainly elements of it that I really enjoyed. Same with other seasons in the first 2 eras. So I think it is worth doing that. And this season, the changes that go on, particularly with the TARDIS team, which is revolved a couple of times, and you see different types of stories coming out. But you also see that, for me, what I've enjoyed so much about some of the early seasons is you see the templates for other stories that I know a lot better. So like this setup, like you say, is sort of similar to sort of vampire legends where you have an advanced race and you have a a savage race. How many times you see that replicated across Doctor Who in different guises, different types of stories? How many times have we seen people join the TARDIS crew or leave the TARDIS crew in different ways? So I think it gives you a greater appreciation of what comes after this, and there are certain things where they're saying, right, this is the template for this kind of story, or this is a way you could go with this. So I've really sort of enjoyed going back into these.
I think we'll have to go back to the Savage, but I think season one is beautifully carved out, and it gets the end, and it knows where it is. Season 2 is more of season 1, but bigger, because they know it's a hit and it's a riding it. Whereas I think when we get to season 3 here, there's a slight uncertainty, because it knows what has made it a hit, but it can't keep doing the same, and it's trying to see where it's got to go to keep going. Season 3 is possibly the trickiest season. I mean, I know later on sort of 7 has to relaunch and all this, but I think this is the absolute, this could have been it. I think there are points, aren't there, where it's like there's no guarantees that this is going to keep going, or if Mr. Hartnell leaves, then that's all right, we'll end the show. This is such shaky grounds, because it has become such a huge success, and it was a massive sort of shift into being in the top 10 rating. But it's not new anymore, but it's got to not rely on itself, and it's got to find a new identity, and you see that this is the transition period. Whereas when it gets to season 4, it's bam, it's on it. It knows what it's doing, and it's back off on its trajectory. But this is this sort of whole season, I think, is lots of great stories. I think they're all lots. I've given most of them 7, I notice, which is consistent. But I think it is a real transition period, and I know it's difficult behind the scenes, and I don't think it's difficult in front. I don't think it's difficult on screen to watch, but it is interesting in context to look at and think,
And watching it really feels that way as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, I think the Savages could easily fit into the season after, and I think if it were Patrick Troughton with Ben and Polly, I don't think I'd have batted an eyelid. I think it's very much the mould that's going to go forward. I think that's not to say it's not a Hartnell story or Hartnell's not great in it, but I think you could see him in this. I couldn't see the second Doctor in the Gunfighters. This is the mould that they're going for.
And it comes back to what I think I said in the last recording. It's that change of the guard, and it's that stepping up of the storytelling. It's moving into a different way of telling the story. It isn't that sort of straightforward, simple approach that's taken in the first couple of seasons. They're trying new things, and it feels just like it's just taken a step change. It's not more adult necessarily, but there's more science. There's more science fiction in it necessarily than I think there was in some of the earlier seasons that had preceded it.
I like that you don't have to have any of the "who are you, where you've come from," because there's kind of magic to them saying, "We know who you are. We've been following your adventures. We didn't enjoy the last one so much, but we really like the one in Rome." I think it's nice that they've been watching him. They know he's going to turn up. That's a really nice sort of setup to it.
I wonder if they've got any missing episodes.
They know which skips they were going to be thrown into. They know where in the desert they need to go with the digger. They know all of it. If anyone out there, and I'll do because we did this with the Wheel in Space, if anyone out there knows where Claire Jenkins is, she's one of the mysteries. Even Lee and Ben have not hunted her down to her home address. That is how hard to find she is. So if you know where Claire Jenkins is out there, if you haven't gone looking for her, check down your local Morrison's or something. She might be in there. You'll know her. She'll have a copy of the Wheel in Space on CD and a copy of the Savage in Space on the other. She'll be like, it's me. You've seen Claire Jenkins.
All these Morrisons of Tannoy announcements suddenly going on this week. Claire,
honestly,
are you in here?
Maybe that's the way to find her, do supermarket announcements around the country. She's got to be somewhere. Or, well, maybe she's not. But, I mean, if you know where Claire Jenkins is, have a look. I know where Kay Patrick and Robert Sidaway are because I email them, but I don't know where Claire Jenkins is. Anyway, do we have any facts on Doctor Who and the Savages?
I was just having a look.
I can't believe you haven't got a guard's helmet on. I feel a bit bereft after we had the card and the cowboy hat. I thought you could have had a guard hat.
I did 2 in 1 last time, so I'm just like...
You could have painted yourself gold like Frederick Jaeger.
Yeah. Jason's come as one of the Savages, it's fine.
Oh, he's come Jason's come as someone who's had the processing, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And his life force drained into a little pot of Marmite. Yeah, so this was the first serial since the Crusades that they had telesnaps, because there was a period where there was nothing taken. And I believe it's the first story where nobody actually dies. None of the characters, none of the TARDIS crew actually die. Although the Savages are being drained.
Nobody dies in the Edge of Destruction.
Apart from that. But that's like, what? Tiny episode.
It's still a story.
It's got a great script.
Well, that's one that does rely on its script.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
So originally, all the elders were going to be blackface, but that was written out, and apparently it was originally going to be a parable about apartheid, but they decided against that idea, so they removed that. Hence why the working title was White Savages. Writer Ian Stuart Black hoped that Doctor Who credit would impress his children. So that's one of the reasons why he was involved. Yeah, that was it.
Is it the first time the same person writes consecutive
stories? Yeah, 2 consecutive stories.
Money in the bank, Zilda. That's the Doctor Who quote as well, Jason. Always come cold in Cardiff. Do we have scores then on Doctor Who and the Savages? I mean, I presume we have. It's more a question which one of you is going to hand it over first.
I'll go first. Yeah, it is formulaic, but it doesn't necessarily sort of drag its heels. It's not, apart from Stephen's departure at the end, it's not necessarily notable for much else. Like I say, there's some elements of the story that I quite liked, but overall, it's not a bad story. But I did give it 5.5. I've gone fractional.
We all love a fraction.
We don't mind a fraction.
We love a rounded fraction, I think Jason said.
Yeah.
I've made these numbers up.
He's gonna go 5.75 now.
Don't put it past me, James. Okay, yeah, it's a pretty good 4-part story. It is in keeping with Doctor Who stories that will come in the future. It's not dissimilar to some stories that have been there in the past, but there's just something about the story on this one where I think, again, we're just seeing that different direction change, which I've said, and it's one I'd like to see. I think Christopher Barry's direction would always be good to watch on screen. This stage he's cut his teeth and got a few under his belt, so he gets the opportunity to go outside on location, which significantly hadn't happened for some stories actually leading up to this. So it's kind of nice to see that the budget being spent for a bit of outdoor filming. Good guest cast in this one, and obviously the departure of Stephen, which for me is sad to see him leave, because I think he's been quite a mainstay of the series through this season. So I am in keeping with my always wanting to stick just a half on where James has been. No, I'm kidding. I actually also scored this 5.5.
Oh.
He's just copying now. He's not even adding the half on. Honestly, there's a cold front down that bay, isn't there? There's a cold front. Well, once again, I think you've both been a little bit on the stingy side there. I know I said it was formulaic. I think it's a very enjoyable formulaic. And I think actually I would watch the reconstruction. I'm not going to watch it tomorrow. I'd watch the reconstruction of this again. It's a story I'd probably like to be a bit more familiar with. I've probably only ever done it like half a dozen times ever, just listening to it or whatever. There is a fantastic commentary available for this from on our Who Talks, though. Have to let that out there. Actually, as I've said before, it's always interesting to do them where there isn't a visual, because I think it's very important. And we did one episode with Kay Patrick and Peter Thomas, and the other episode with Peter Purves. And obviously Peter Thomas is no longer with us. And he was a lovely chap. The other two are both lovely. I'll keep saying lovely, but Peter was a lovly chap, and he did quite a few events with us as well. It's a shame, because I think he, again, is a good part in this, and it's a good villain part in this. But because you can't see it, it's slightly forgotten in a way that, it wouldn't be if you'd had the VHS since 1997 or something. So I think that Savages would be much more appreciated if we could see it. I think it's slightly forgotten, and I think it's a good story. I gave it a 7. I couldn't work how many fingers I needed then. It's getting later. And then I just did a rude gesture, so I'll go with 7. Peace.
Good score.
Which, thanks my savvy saving there from Stingyville, that brings Doctor Who and the Savages out on 18. It's not a season one, I'm afraid, folks. But there is one more story left, and it is The War Machines. And I literally can't wave a hardback because there's no such thing.
Oh, and that's sad.
There's no other merch. I thought you were going to bring up, the audio recording on LP or something.
It's not come out on vinyl either. It's one of the few that hasn't. So maybe next year on Record Store Day we'll have a lovely shiny Votan, a War Machine on the front. They could do quite nice cover for that. I'd buy that vinyl straight away and never listen to it.
Still in its original packaging.
String wraps unless it's signed. So, who's got an introduction for the watch? I have a sort of an introduction. So my introduction is Photon Earth has happened to Dodo, because we've just been talking about the way that Peter was written out, and I think it's fair to say that the way that Jackie is written out is worse, and I mean, her contract ended halfway through the story, and rather than just say, "Okay, love, don't worry, we'll build your exit up, and we'll have some payoff at the end," she's just written out. It's just a line from Polly at the end to say, "Oh, Dodo's decided to stay."
And I mean, not only is she written out, but she's written out in such an inglorious way. And it is also, if you were to just look at these couple of episodes and you look at the character of Dodo, it is nothing like the character of Dodo that we've just watched as we've developed our way through season 3. It's awful.
I mean, the feistiness that we were just talking about, she ends up being sort of hypnotized by the computer. She's constantly keeps trying to sort of, get the doctor to engage with it and become hypnotized as well. Realizes that she's been hypnotized. The doctor works out what's going on, flashes his ring at her, and says, "Oh, she's going to sleep for the next 48 hours after seeing my ring," and then that's it. You don't, there's not even, like when Barbara and Ian left and there was the happy montage at the end, and it's just like, yeah, she's dead to us now. We've got 2 new companions. They've managed to pick up a key, and guess what? They're on board for the next series. And I think, whilst we'll talk about the story itself separately, I think it's a really horrible way that her time on Doctor Who was brought to an end. And I know there were things that were going on behind the scenes. I know that they were like, no, we're not renewing the contract. And I know they described it as unfortunate timing, or that she was a victim of circumstance because it ran out halfway through the story. But if you've got that, got a companion that's going to be leaving, at least have some sort of build, or some sort of legitimate reason, even if it was just a cameo at the end where she said, Doctor, I've loved traveling with you, but I'm back in my own time, or I want to stay, something, rather than just third hand someone coming up and saying, oh yeah, she's decided she don't want to travel with you anymore.
And when you think they probably filmed the exit sequence at the TARDIS on location at the same time that they filmed the intro scene, because they would have done that presumably together, there would have been no reason why they couldn't have actually had a closing scene with her potentially.
It would have been an extra episode for you, wouldn't it, I guess?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that sort of odd thing that Ben and Polly, when they come to go, they're contracted till, I think, episode 2 of Evil of the Daleks, but they decided, the out is Faceless One's gone. It could quite easily have just, in the last story, been like, Stephen says, I'm going to become the ruler of this thing, and Dodo said, well, I can't leave you on your own here. I'll stay. And that would have been an absolute perfect out, because they'd have both been left quite merrily doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have started this story with TV's Doctor Who just, landing on his own. I mean, there isn't much call for it. I mean, at the end, when she's like, oh, she sends her love, goes, her love. It's kind of even there's even a sort of Hartnell vibe of, all right, that's a strange script point, isn't it? That she's just not even, she's not even sent him a letter. She's just sent the key back, like a wronged girlfriend or something. It's kind of like, I'm sure after all they've been through, that you'd have just gone back and said, Doctor, I've realised that I'm a bit tired, and this is it, and I'm happy being back where I am. But it is that thing that we sort of said, Peter didn't choose to go, he went. There's a whole run. I mean, Debs is the first person in quite some time when she goes to decide that she wants to leave, rather than being pushed out of it, being a bit brutal. So I suppose it is sort of slightly foreshadowing what happens with Ben and Polly in some ways, that what happens when they're introduced and the last one goes. And I think in some ways the vitality and the attack of the character of Dodo that we've seen in the previous stories is what they give to Polly in this one, which is then sort of lost quite quickly, because we've done season 4 like the smugglers. She gets a bit wet, and I just wonder whether the script as was, and I don't know the ins and outs of the development on it, but the script seems to be very Dodo-y, because she's very inquisitive, she's very bright, and she's very engaging. I mean, there's no two ways around it. I think Ben and Polly do make a massive impact as soon as they come into it. There's no sort of, who are these people? They're the regulars. They are sparking, and this is the new team. But I do, as you both said, I do just look at it and think, oh, it's so hard on Dodo. Just that.
I mean, it's really because going back to the actual story. I mean, they arrive in London. The Doctor gets goosebumps and goes, "Oh, I've not felt this since the Daleks were here," and goes off to investigate the telecom tower. And then later on, Dodo's in a nightclub in this bar with Polly, who she's just met, talking about this sailor that she'd just met a couple of nights beforehand. And it's really strange. And then suddenly, the three of them are sort of like, oh, let's go and have an adventure together. But there is a vibrancy with Ben and Polly. I think you're right. they're not just, you know, characters that are in it for one story. It immediately jumps out that, you know, Polly is very, again, is very inquisitive. It has taken over that from Dodo in this story. Yeah, again with Stephen, he's quite, you know, intrepid and adventurous, and, you know, he's not afraid to throw himself into danger. So I think they instantly have that, but I think sadly at the cost of the, you know, the Dodo character, who swiftly gets rid, you know, and then the sort of, you know, the Doctor continues his story, you know, battling with the supercomputer and putting some rope around a war machine to stop it. I mean, I know it's an electromagnetic field, but it doesn't have to look like some rope from school. You know, just to put a cordon around it, and that's it. It's temporarily paralyzed. So, you know, the Doctor carries on with the main story. We're, you know, trying to defeat the Voton machine, but yeah, and then Ben and Polly sort of come along at the end and go, oh, you know, we've got a key, let's let ourselves in, and end of series.
But what we do have, though, is quite a vibrant contemporary London story sitting underneath this. And again, it's, I mean, I always kind of like stories when they put them back to the contemporary. This could be just as easily a John Pertwee story as it is a William Hartnell story, because if you think, in many respects, this, although they didn't set a unit template until much later on in Pat Troughton's years, you know, this essentially could be the forerunner, if you like, of what we were going to have as Doctor Who fans several years later. There's always something about the menace on your doorstep. And albeit the war machines themselves are a bit clunky, and, you know, back in 1966, the post office tower was new to the viewers, and, you know, it isn't a bad concept for them to come up with an idea that there's an alien menace at the top of this new tower, and it's, you know, potentially the computer's going to take over the world. So it's great to have that sort of threat on your doorstep type story, and we haven't had this for quite some time in Doctor Who. So there's a lot to be said about, I think, about this story. And again, it's nice to have it all there in the archives as well, because it's kind of nice to watch it.
It does have a sort of unit vibe, and the army sequences and all the sort of the fights and all that stuff is all very sort of Havoc style, you know, it's in that build. It's interesting that obviously it works. I mean, from our perspective watching it, I think it really works having a contemporary setting, and it must be cheaper because, you know, you go outside and you haven't got to dress it up, it's just where you're. But they don't take that and go, actually that's a good idea, we should do more, because it's not until we go back to the faceless ones that we're back in, I mean, literally back on the same day, aren't we, because of Ben and Polly go. But they don't see that as being a good thing, and yet it is a kind of relatable threat. But by the same token, I suppose it is limited, because you've got to go, what terrible luck London was having on that day, because you've got the war machines, you've got the chameleons, and you've got the Daleks. They were all up to something that day. It was a right old villain fest. But I think the thing I love possibly most about this, I think Michael Ferguson has got such a fresh attack on the directing. I love his styling, and just little bits, like I love the reflections of the war machines and the puddles and things like that. And he's giving it a full action direction. He's not just making sure it's in focus and it's all done on time. He's coming at it with a creative eye, and I think that's great. He was a fantastic director, so I think it's great to see the visuals to this. I mean, again, back to our old argument on this season, we could be having the same discussion talking about Myth Makers, or probably not Galaxy 4, but, you know, the visuals of how it's been directed are such an impact on this, because, again, as an audio, you'd have a lot of Votan noises, which wouldn't be great, would it? I mean, I with the visual, it makes perfect sense, and you can see machines and all that stuff, but I think as an audio, it might be a struggle. So we've got to be eternally thankful that actually we do have this to watch.
I mean, this is what I was saying just a little while ago about how in these seasons there are these, you know, stories that you see the templates for things to come. So like you were saying, this is so reminiscent of a Pertwee story where you've got a supercomputer that's taking over people and, you know, to build devices. You've got the sort of origins, if you like, of a unit. You know, you've got the soldier involvement, and I love the fact that their weapons don't work. You know, they throw a grenade and they're all being neutralized. So and using a London landmark as a, you know, as a point of reference for things which we see even now with things like the Millennium Wheel and things like that, where landmarks are turning into secret, you know, alien bases and things like that. So I love all those concepts, and even now they're quite fresh concepts. They're find new ways of doing those. So I like that. I like the machines. Yes, they're bit clunky, and there was only one that they built. They just kept swapping the number over because they didn't have the budget to build more. But again, you know, thinking back to, you know, the 60s, they wouldn't necessarily look as clunky as we look at them now. But, you know, there would have been kids going, oh my God, you know, I might see one of those coming down the street, you know, when I'm on my way to school. And I think this is, for me, it's like, here is a really successful template for Doctor Who stories setting in contemporary Earth, you know, with an unusual villain. So it's not really extraterrestrial, it's just scientists who have built this computer that is so good it now thinks it's better than humans. And that's a story that is repeated time and time again in science fiction. So going back to what you were saying, Jason, these stories now are starting to lean more into the science. There's not a, you know, bug-eyed green alien behind it. It's a supercomputer that was created by humans that is now turning against humans. And there's something so relatable to that, you know. And you know, I remember watching things like Tomorrow's World, where they would be talking about robots that were, you know, cars that would fly and things like that. And there is something that taps into that fear of what if computers were more, because they're talking about setting up a World Wide Web, essentially, aren't they? They're talking about this computer linking to other computers to set up a network. And it taps into some very basic human fears about technology. So I you know, on all those levels, ticks a lot of boxes as a Doctor Who story.
It's still a sort of relevant fear, isn't it? Because Votan knows stuff because it sort of, it listens or it gets involved. I mean, if I talk about jam sandwiches now, something will come up on Amazon as a targeted advert for jam. I mean, they're always listening.
Yeah.
So I think that it does, as funny as it is to go, actually, when you're watching it, they're talking about the internet, which was the land of Nod, you know, 1966. It wasn't the thought of, you know, a video phone or something. It was all future. But what prescient future? Because that is how things, you know, rolled. But I do find it funny when TV's Doctor Who, as you said, lands and he goes, "Oh, I only get this from the Daleks round." You think the War Machines? I'm not sure. I mean, mate, if you're going to do that for the War Machines, you didn't do it for the Chumbleys. I think your senses are going, and it's time for a regeneration because you're not. I mean, Big Finish will bring them back, but you're not going to have the War Machines again here. Although I do love the design again, because it has got that lovely sort of 60s aesthetic, and I think it's great. And I do love the big smashy arms, and it's shot really well, and it, you know, powers through the cardboard boxes and all that sort of stuff. And the fire extinguisher hoses are very reminiscent of the sort of Daleks in the Cushing movies, aren't they? It's all, you know, it's great. It looks great. It looks like a little tank. It is a great thing. But again, it's a little bit like with the oh come on, the mechanoids. Is that thing? Yeah. It's a little bit too clunky to be a huge menace or one that you could bring back. I mean, how it fitted in the lift
in the elevator.
It just, I think Professor Brett needs to say, how did you get up here? as it sort of steams on in. But it is great. I just this whole it's got one of my favourite sort of cliffhangers. The one where Hartnell faces down the camera and the light's coming towards it. It's a great shot, absolutely great shot. It is. It's a lovely, pacey, fresh feel, and it is so well directed. So yeah, it is a favourite of mine.
Yeah, and even the studio stuff. I mean, the stuff on location's done really well, but even the studio stuff in the when they're under the arches in that sort of secret base where they're building the first of the war machines, and they pull the floor back, and they've gone into the war machines moving around there, and it just feels like an alien menace, or a menace in the way that, again, I just think the little thought and the detail in the shots that are chosen for the program, I think, work well. And you've even got little details like you've got the sergeants, you've got the majors in the background of the shot where Hartnell's having his close up, and they've all got these sort of proper mustaches like the majors in the Pertwee years would have. So you've got stereotypical sort of army in there that works. And I said, I think it's just because it's a contemporary threat as well for me. And this is one that I would go back and watch quite regularly because it's probably one of my more favoured Hartnell stories, actually.
And Frank Butcher, obviously. You can see Frank Butcher quite a lot in this, can't you?
No spinning dicky bow tie, though. That's the.
I mean, it's interesting that we've just been talking about the Savages and about how they take the energy off of Hartnell, and they, he takes on board his morality. And in this story, there is the point where the Doctor has reprogrammed the war machine to go back to the telecom tower to destroy the computer, and knowing full well that Polly is in the telecom tower and is in danger from his plan, and Ben's like, but you can't do that. We've got to go and rescue Polly, and the Doctor's very sort of like, well, you were just thinking about one person. I'm thinking about everybody. If she dies, she dies. It's like, but I'm going to save everybody, and I find that quite an interesting thing. Again, especially as Ben's just met the Doctor, he's very sort of like, right, yeah, let me tell you how this works. If one person is sacrificed to save the rest of the world, that's what, unfortunate, but that's what has to happen.
But that moment is one of my favourite awful Hartnell acting moments. He goes, no, come back, you foolish boy. It's terrible, isn't it? I kind of just inside go, oh, it's fine. I forgive you, Doctor Who. You've been great for 3 years. That's one of those, oh no, okay, it's fine. And there's also a bit where Ben goes, you destroy half London. That's another one where I think it's just a little bit over, but we'll forgive you. You're great. We love that. Yeah, I think the ending does feel slightly rushed in some ways because it's just the war machine goes, and that bit where the war machine's bobbing in front of the back projection is quite sweet, isn't it? I like that. Treasure hunts Kenneth Kendall as well is worth noting because I think that's nice. It's a nice contemporary nod, isn't it? When you see an actual news presenter on it. I know we have Trinity Wells in the news series, but imagine the thrill if it had been Kate Adie or Moira Stewart or something. You'd have howled with joy for that. But there is something sweet about recognisably saying this is someone reporting on it, I suppose, because I think did Big Finish not do a meet point and they used Angela Rippon, I think. There is something sweet about having actual news presenters talking about an alien invasion or whatever. It just brings that little bit of verisimilitude towards it, doesn't it?
And the post office tower, as I think I said earlier, would have been very new to the public at that point. So to put the threat, if you like, into something so new and so unique in London as a landmark, I think that was quite an interesting take, in my opinion.
You get the lovely Blue Peter stuff for this as well, don't you? I love Christopher Trace gets to meet a war machine and all that stuff. Then Auntie Valerie's very much, well, I'm Doctor Who's in for a lot of trouble this week. I love all that. They're so beautiful. They're so of the time, aren't they? It's just incredible. But yeah, it would have been a big deal, sort of the whole post office tower, and you know, I think they wanted to do more filming closer, and it didn't quite pan out because it was opening and they couldn't do it because it was so close to the date. I mean, even now when I go to London and it's there in the distance, I don't go, that's post office tower. I go, look, it's Wotan. That's what it is, folks. William Mervyn, great. Character's slightly Boris Johnson in some ways, isn't he? When he has that moment where all those soldiers have been slaughtered, he goes, but if it weren't for us doing this, we wouldn't have foiled this. And it's all a bit kind of, yeah, he's very good, isn't he? And I think, again, you can see Hartnell responds because he knows he's an actor of stature. And yeah.
But it's that establishment figure again, isn't it? And this, again, has shades of Pertwee again, because Pertwee works with the establishment figures, although he considers himself anti-establishment, he still works with them during his years on Earth.
Wasn't it? Was it not Terence? It was Terence Dix, wasn't it? Who said that the problem with going to is either Terence or Malcolm Holt. One of them said it, the other said, your problem with being on Earth, you've either got mad scientists or alien invasion. That those are your two options. And I suppose you've got that, haven't you? Because it is not a mad scientist, but it is scientists have made this taken over.
Supercomputer. When will science learn, eh?
So, do we have any exotic facts on Doctor Who and the computers? Why are you dressed up like a war machine? I'm starting to think this is a conspiracy now. We had 2 cosplays for the last video, none for this one. If you'd like to complain about the lack of Wotan cosplay, put it in the comments, but put it in capital letters.
Oh, they will. They will.
Troll him.
We meant. Oh, go on.
No, troll him.
Troll him. Oh, thanks.
They troll you.
Don't.
Find him on Twitter and troll him.
I'll do my puppy dog eyes. No, they're not puppy dog eyes.
That's controlled by Wotan, I say.
Quick, flashy ring. No.
Oh no, look, I can. Oh no, it's not a sparkly one.
That sparkly one. Has he got like? Because it's described as a blue diamond. Is it a bit of Metabilis crystal in his ring?
It's the same magical crystal that opened the TARDIS with the special properties from the sun on the volcano planet. It's like Jodie's Sonic. He just keeps doing that.
It's good if it doesn't get overused.
You wanted to shout abuse out of a car window, would you? Anyway, exotic facts on Doctor Who and the computers.
There's only a couple of other things that we haven't mentioned. So the idea came from a Kit Pedler TV interview where he was talking, funnily enough, about using a London landmark as as a point of reference for a story. So I think in the last episode it gives him a credit. So it's based on an idea by Kit Pedler. We already mentioned previously that this is Ian Stewart Black's second story in On the Bounce, which is a first for Doctor Who. Due to budget, there was no incidental music for this story. And it's the first time and only time in Hartnell and Troughton where we've got a complete. There's no sort of like crossover on companions. We get a complete shift over onto 2 new companions. We get brand new TARDIS team. So that was it. That was everything else we have mentioned.
For those at home that are interested, Anneke Wills is wearing a Marimekko design dress. Marimekko, popular designer that actually very expensive, and it was her own dress because TV's Doctor Who could not afford such garments. You can currently get Marimekko, a collection from Adidas. So if you are an Adidas wearer, you can get a War Machine-y, Iki design on your tracksuit and your casuals.
Wow.
That's the fashion corner, folks. It'll be back next week. So let's have our concluding scores then, because Jason's got to get to the off license before it closes.
All right, it's
Honestly,
it's still
looking
got
at his
another-
watch, this is fraught, folks. This is like studio clock moment. This is like,
It's still
they're
got
gonna
20
close.
for his
They're
summer.
gonna close. I won't make it through.
We're running the studio clock down here, that's for sure.
I feel like Mary Ridge now. Like, just say goodbye, Nissa, and we can go home. Okay, who has a score?
Go on, Jace.
Yeah, okay. Unashamedly like this story. One of those Hartnell stories that I would watch quite regularly, out of sequence. I like the contemporary setting. I think that gives this story a fresh feel for a Hartnell. Really nothing like this has been done, but then quite a few of the stories this season have just tried to sort of break that mold a little bit. And I think this is one that almost stumbles into that sort of, let's put it on contemporary Earth, let's have an alien threat or a menace or a mad computer threat, and, you know, pitch it up against the regular army and have little touches like Kenneth Kendall reading the news. And you know what? It's just so many things that are right with this story, that it feels properly Doctor Who, and I could see Pat Troughton or John Pertwee actually quite easily sitting in this story alone. I do think the way that the character of Dodo's written out is clumsy and awkward, but I can't take away from the story in this instance. And I think that The War Machines is most certainly one of my favorite William Hartnell stories that there is. As I said, I think it's the contemporary setting for me, and it just gives it a different feel. So I am quite unashamedly scoring The War Machines 10.
Oh, he's taking your 10, James. He's taking your 10 away. Wow. You can't score it 10 and a half either.
Well, I'm not scoring it a 10, but it is a good story. And for many of the reasons that you've just said, I think there is a... When I watch this, it's almost like I'm watching another season. It having sort of come off the back of the last couple of stories, it feels like, I know it's the end of the season, but it feels like a fresh start when you've got Ben and Polly suddenly, you know, joining the TARDIS crew. The way that it's produced, the way that it's directed, the shots, the contemporary setting, all of that, as I say, is like tick box template for great stories. And yes, I agree. I could quite easily see Pertwee in the role with Unit rather than the soldiers, and you would have, probably a classic season, 7 or 8 story, maybe with Liz trying to work out what's going on with the computer or something. So, you could easily see that template working for other Doctors. I do find it jarring the way that Dodo is written out, and I just, even if they had just managed to, get her to film a segment and then play it at the end, I appreciate they may not have been able to do that because they'd have to pay her for an episode, but I just feel that there's something lacking there from a character that had shown so much promise, and then suddenly it's just like, well, yeah, she's gone to sleep for 48 hours and then she's not coming back. So I scored this an 8.
Where's his 10 gone? Where's the 10 gone?
I don't know. He used it on Dalek's master plan.
I really enjoyed Dalek's master plan.
There's a reconstruction.
For many reasons. It's got a good script.
Got a great script. It's got the Daleks in it. It's black and white. It stars William Hartnell. It's set in space.
I think he's giving himself. I think he's giving himself 10 for having sat through the recons on it.
That was, well, the badly drawn Feast of Stephen was a challenge.
If only they credited it that at the front, the badly drawn Feast of Stephen.
Badly drawn version.
Yeah, I really like War Machines. I can remember getting the War Machines on. You remember they had that rebrand after the McGann movie, and this was the first where they just everything had, it was black sheep design, wasn't it? Everything just had a swirl. So it was 3 pictures and a swirl, and it was all very modern and exciting. I remember going to the Virgin Megastore, we miss you, and getting the VHS of this, because it would have been around about my birthday, so it was about July, I think it came out. Yeah. Lovely. Always loved it. Always think it's a great, fun story. It's one of those I think you can watch quite often, and it's always just fun, because even if you're not necessarily watching it, you go out, come back, and it's still fun and all that. Anyway, I am happily between the 2 of you, and I scored The War Machines 9.
Ooh.
Yeah. You
didn't go for the Big 10.
I didn't go for the Big 10. I thought I would be the rose between the thorns. What? Which all means that we have got, drum roll, I feel like I should have that kind of psychedelic top of the pop 70s thing going on with the music. The top 10 of season 3. And at the bottom is The Gunfighters, which has got a good script, which is about cowboys and William Hartnell and cowboys. Oh, it's cold in Cardiff, it's cold. Bright summer's day and it's freezing in there.
It's not a bright summer's day out there anymore.
He's got his eyes on the off license. So 12.5 for the Gunfighters. 9th place is Galaxy 4 on 13.5. 8th place is the Savages on 18. That's your scoring.
Feels low.
Look to yourselves for that scoring.
Yeah, I agree.
7th place on 19 points, only just ahead, Celestial Toymaker. Joint 5th, we have Mission to the Unknown and The Massacre on 20.5. Joint 3rd, we have The Mythmakers and The Ark, both on 21. In 2nd place, this is like Sam Ryder at the Eurovision, led all the way. Guy's Master Plan, 24 points. But our season winner is the finale, is The War Machines on 27.
Hey!
It's interesting quite how many of those are actually quite close scores, actually. There's not a lot in it, which bizarrely makes it possibly, from our scoring, if not reality, one of the most consistent runs, even given the strange workings behind the scenes. So, a worthy winner?
Yeah,
I think so.
By the time they get to this episode, that formula, that, you know, it's all there. Admittedly, they don't go back to it for a bit, but I think, you know, it ends on a high going into what we know is going to be a very changeable season again until it finds its feet again.
Yeah, it definitely reaches a high here. And I think the introduction of the 2 new companions and the fact that they've come up with a fresh idea, and it is a fresh idea in Who terms at this stage, with the storytelling in this story, I think it does deserve the score, and I think it is a nice, a real strong end to what is a generally a good season on the whole.
I actually love the last shot of it where the TARDIS takes off and those 2 people walk by and off. That's a nice end to it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much if you've watched this at home and you liked it and you subscribed to it and you've commented. Like, is it the right winner? Would you have picked anything different as your season winner? Let us know who your winner was below. Thank you very much, guys.
Pleasure as always.
Yep. Thank you very much.
I'm off to put some rope around my laptop to see if it can control it. And we shall see you again very soon. Bye-bye.